his time on YouTube, Logan Paul has found himself in many controversies, from the Forest incident to up till recently the Crypto Zoo stuff, but in today's video we're going to be focusing on some stuff that's been unfolding as of recent, and that is his decaying relationship with George, one of his co-hosts on Impulsive. Or should I say now, ex-co-host. The start of George's and Logan Paul's public struggles started with Logan Paul's constant bashing of George's religion, which is Christianity. It went far beyond just simple jokes and banter to actually disrespecting George's beliefs and calling him stupid for believing in them. But not only this, but George did not reciprocate this humor and clearly didn't enjoy the jokes. He didn't find them funny, and Logan Paul, who was meant to be one of his closest friends, didn't stop and completely dismissed his emotional feelings in the situation.
Because I'll be honest with you, bro, Jesus Christ, oh God, genuinely, I know people that hate me, that treat me better about my faith than you, and you're my best friend. So like, one that really hurt me is you told me I need a therapist because I believe in Jesus. I just am definitely questioning why we have to perpetuate a belief that is silly. I think it's a silly practice to engage in, and I think it deserves satire.
People not only called out Logan Paul for his offensive comments towards Christianity and religion as a whole, but also his blatant disregard of George's feelings and how he came across in the episode. The internet not only sympathized with George, but also launched a hate campaign against Logan Paul for his blatant horrific comments towards George about his religion and how he just did not care. However, not everybody thought the same thing. A lot of people use this as a way to disrespect George, as a lot of people didn't like him on the podcast. A lot of people thought he was quite a useless co-host and didn't deserve to be on Impulsive. So this gave people an outlet to willingly make fun of George for his religion and him as a person. Due to this, a lot of clips circulated around the similar time, proving that George was a useless co-host Impulsive and boosting hate towards him.
Hold on, you ain't gonna ask me a question? Oh, damn.
He waits. He likes to wait until he's got the... Bro, listen, man, I read the Bible a lot when they talk about David and Goliath. I've never seen a giant, and so like I'm literally just... I'm a little taken.
You've been sitting over here for 30 minutes and that's all you can freaking say. What are you doing here? Ask a question, G.
However, eventually Logan Paul and George would sit down to film an episode of Impulsive, and Logan Paul would talk about how he thought he was being inspired by God and would eventually apologize to George.
My attitude towards you on that episode and my belittlement of your beliefs was not appropriate at all. Not as a podcast host, especially not as a friend. I had made the mistake of assuming that the part represents the whole in terms of the intolerance that does exist in your religion. Every Christian I know, pretty much, is incredibly warm, loving, accepting, and forgiving.
In this episode of Impulsive, Logan and George continue to talk about this, discussing religion and the effects that Logan Paul's comments had on him. It came across as a pretty genuine and sincere conversation. However, this wouldn't be the last time or even the first time that Logan Paul would make judgmental comments about George and his religion. George's role in Impulsive since he joined as a co-host had always been pretty rocky. Issues with Logan Paul on the podcast had always arisen, as Logan Paul was a pretty judgmental guy and mocked him often, adding to a lot of tension to the podcast before Bobby Lee eventually came on as a guest, which was the final thing that broke the camel's back. On this episode of Impulsive, while Bobby Lee was there, George opened up about a lot of things and some of the hardest times in his life, saying that he gained 40 pounds in 1 year and that without Christianity, he probably would have taken his own life. He tries to open up to Logan Paul and everyone else around him, but instead, Bobby Lee makes fun of him because that's within his character to do so, and Logan Paul hops on that train.
But like, dude, this put me on a very strong map, and it made a lot of my avenues blow up. So I'm very blessed, but I didn't know I was gonna be here. So
it's like that's... Are you done? It was just a long monologue.
He was just waiting.
Let me just say something. I loved what you were saying. It was just very long.
We're gonna go. And while that is a very real stressor and can lead people down a dark path into a not so fun place, that's called pressure, brother. And some people aren't built to handle that. Others are.
Oh, you talking to me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
I tuned you guys.
I saw you. I was looking at you. I'm like, yo, he's delivering a beautiful
I
message.
thought you guys were, because your back was towards me. So
No.
I thought you guys were talking to each other. My bad.
He said something during this podcast, and I'm going to reiterate.
Do you fucking listen?
These comments that were directed from Bobby Lee and Logan Paul eventually made George walk off the set of Impulsive. A lot of people mocked and were heavily critical of George for opening up like this in front of Bobby Lee and crying when the comedian Bobby Lee made fun of him. George is meant to be a comedian himself, a lot pointed out, saying that this felt heavily hypocritical and there was just no place for this in this episode.
There are certain.
He is clocked out.
Yeah, I know.
George has been under a tremendous amount of abuse.
No,
No, stop, George. I want you over here with me. George, I want you over here with me. Chase him down. Go. You find him. George, no, go get him. Go get him. I said this, he walked, and that's a first, and now we're going to have to deal with the fallout of this episode for the next 2 months. I swear to God, Bobby Lee, you pissed off my co-host. He's probably crying in the driveway.
You know, the Beatles could have lost Ringo.
Oh, yeah.
Due to this episode and a lot of other dramas and factors for George, he actually ended up leaving Impulsive and unfollowing a lot of the crew and core members of Impulsive, leading to a strained relationship with Mike and Logan Paul. It wasn't until a recent episode of George's own podcast that he created after leaving that people really saw what happened behind the scenes. In this podcast with Mike, George spoke about how controlling Logan was and how dismissive he was behind the scenes, something that was reflected in a lot of the episodes that Logan did with George, and people were completely outraged by some of the things that George was revealing about Logan.
Who was the first person that jumped off the couch and said, George just left, that was not good, we have to fix the situation?
Did they not cut shit that you should have stood up for me and said, hey, you can't cut that shit? This was an episode that was you, and what happened to you, and then the whole world thinks that I walked away because I can't take a joke. That's fucking what to do on my own show. That's not okay.
What's that about?
He told me that I couldn't take Celsius. And then I said, hey,
he
man,
didn't tell you that you couldn't take
text
Celsius.
messages.
No, he didn't tell you that you couldn't take Celsius. He
says if I take Celsius, I'm not a part of Impulsive.
Then he told you that if you take Celsius, that you cannot continue to be on Impulsive, which is the core driver for Prime, as you're going to continue to funnel viewership from the Impulsive show back to your show, which promotes a competitive product.
The comments made on this podcast made it out to be that Logan Paul was a manipulative person behind the scenes and needed control, something that Logan Paul didn't like, which would make him respond in a 4-minute video on Twitter. In Logan Paul's response, he would only respond to the Celsius claims and the stuff that people didn't care about, skimming over him apparently cutting clips to make George look worse, and the religious comments made against him. Logan Paul took the easier way out and didn't mention the things that people genuinely cared about.
Yes, obviously I wasn't on the podcast to represent myself, so I'd like to clarify a few things that were said. As well as having his own credit card, all expenses related to the show were paid for, including all travel and lodging. Obviously, George's total reimbursement came out to $20,000, 317 cents. I'd love to see any books that show otherwise. Spending $120,000 a year to be on a show is a little confusing.
A lot of people have criticized Logan for nitpicking stuff out of the podcast rather than responding to the claims that people genuinely thought that he should respond to.
There's a lot more. I'm not going to get into it, but this isn't to say, by the way, that I didn't f*** up along the way. I did. I should not have mocked his beliefs. I apologize for that. I should have stuck up for him with Bobby Lee, and I definitely should have had his back more like a friend. There's a lot of things I would have done differently, but here we are. It saddens me that our story has unfolded this way. I wish him nothing but health, wealth, happiness, all the success that he wants, and I hope that one day we can sit down and have a relationship and a conversation.
The criticism launched against Logan Paul was cited that it was confusing that he skimmed over the stuff that people would genuinely be interested in him responding to, and that he ends it off by not being clear on the things that he actually did fuck up. At the time of recording, George hasn't said anything publicly about Logan's response, but people are ready to hear what else George has to spill about how Logan acted with him behind the scenes. This has been your host Samuel. Subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video.